do it for the plot, do it for the mythology. A lot of people will tell you you're too early or you're too late. But that implies there's a right age and that never seems to come.
Have you made mistakes while giving funding to startups?
Of course, VC is institutionalized gambling. Men are taught to be offensive with their money. We are taught to be very defensive with our money. So we put our money into tools like FDs. But the number of women founders who I've spoken to who've been straight up asked by funders, what if you get married and have children? Who will manage the startup? If you're a young woman, you're watching this, you want to know how to navigate that. How do you maintain or manage your existing responsibilities and you still build? You come to me.
How would you advise a 25-year-old girl if she had 1 lakh of rupees?
50% is
I welcome you to Be Banter.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really honored to have such a bright and successful and ambitious and charming
That's very kind of you.
girl like you with your energy on Be Banter. So I've been given this to read out all your accomplishments and achievements, so I will do that. You champion Gen Z founders across tech, creative industries, and beyond, a columnist, a writer, and a cultural commentator. You've published 2 poetry collections, and next year will release her debut non-fiction book, The Girls Club. Okay. So, about Girls Club. Why Girls Club? I mean, boys are there too.
So the thing is, when I took over what I do now, which is run an early stage fund, I'm a reader and I wanted to find a book about leadership and women, something I could read about and learn from. And I realized every single book was either written from like an American or a Western perspective, or it was written by men, purportedly, gender neutral. But a lot of it didn't echo to me at all. I read it and I said, but I have so many questions this doesn't seem to answer. So I started doing a bit of a deep dive into who has written for women in India. People have written about money, people have written about investments, people have written about technology, but nobody has written for women like me. If I have taken on a challenge, what should I know before I take it on? What should I know while I'm trying to take it on? So I started just writing on Instagram. I was like, as I learn, let me share it with the people around me.
And who were you writing to?
To 19-year-old me. It's stuff I wish someone had told me. Someone had sat me down and told me, you know what? Everyone will tell you it's a level playing field. It's probably not. You just have to be a little smarter than that. And it started echoing with a lot of people. A lot of people reached out and said, I have never felt like someone is talking to me versus at me. And I said, okay, sure, I'll keep writing. And then one by one, publishers started coming and they said, write for us. I said, I don't know if I can yet. Till my mother sat me down and said, but that's what you're writing about. Taking on something, even if you're not entirely ready and trying to do your best with it. So now it's coming out with Penguin next year. Why the Girls Club? Because everything else is a boys' club. And for me, everyone's a girly. If you're a man and you think you get value out of it, please feel free to get it. I just try very hard to decenter men in my conversations as well as in my writing. It's not about men versus women. I just think I write for and with women. And I think that is what I love about a lot of young women who are building. It's not that they have to choose. They don't choose to be an entrepreneur or a writer or a daughter or a sister or a mother or a wife. I think everybody just chooses to be an and. And more support needs to exist around that and. Because most support exists around a but. You are an entrepreneur, but you're an author. Why not an and? And I think more women would benefit a lot from that positioning mentally and emotionally.
And girls like you have to keep on and on talking about it, because somebody like me is doing jewelry and is doing a skincare, a startup, and is doing the podcast.
Yep.
And at the time when I was sort of had a little more time, I was doing before and after for women and etc., etc. And I've never found that. I found that sky is the limit.
Yep. Yep.
And it's so girls like you, I mean, have to put that message across, because a lot of them are even worried about the biological clock.
Yep.
That's a big thing in girls' minds, because you know, when they reach that age where they are already almost ready with a business,
Yeah.
they've got that family traditional cultural pressure that अभी नहीं करोगे तो फिर बच्चा नहीं होएगा, you know. So that makes them into that level of maybe I should get married, you know, and then have my kid, which is okay, because you know, it's nice to have kids. It's part of life and they are beautiful. But there is a fear.
But you know, this is not just a cultural fear. The number of women founders who I've spoken to who've been straight up asked by funders, what if you get married and have children? Who will manage the startup? And you would think these are conversations that don't happen anymore in the kind of places. You know, you're building like a deep tech startup, you're building defense technology for India. And that is the question a funder asks you, not about whether this can fly or whether this, you know, Ministry of Defense will buy it. And these are ground realities that more women founders have come to sort of like, they have finally found themselves being able to talk about it. And you realize how deeply ingrained this is. Some incredible founders I know, Ghazal, Naya, Vinita, all of them are mums. All of them are running incredible startups. And till now, they are considered an anomaly when they are setting the tone for the rest of us. I get this all the time.
But I get it all the time, that
Yeah.
how do you manage your kids? And I have a 4.5 and I have a 30-year-old.
Yeah.
So how do you manage with your work, with your
Yeah.
friends and your lifestyle between London and India? How do you manage? The point is, also being an employer,
Yep.
let me tell you one thing. When you sometimes take on a girl employee and you train her and you spend a lot of time investing in her, and suddenly she just picks up and leaves because she's getting married, you know, it is a blow.
Of course.
So it's because, you know, culturally, again, they're putting that before their career.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like I'm working and I'm getting married. So it's so it's scary for an employer too.
Yep.
You know, and I say this being on this side of the gender,
Yeah.
that for me too, if I see employer 25, 26, 27-year-old, I would ask her, do you have plans to get married? Because you know that you're investing so much.
Yeah.
And for me, I love girls in my office. I love the fact that they are working and, you know, they're making something of their lives and they're growing.
Yep.
I mean, it gives me, I guess I don't sort of come from that background of thought where the girl has to wake up early morning, cook
Yeah.
at 5 a.m. or 5:30 for the whole family,
Yes.
and clean and wash and everything and then go to work. You see, because a lot of families believe that they cannot employ help in the house because they feel the daughter should do it.
Yes.
So I really push the girls to understand that they don't need to do that. However, I sometimes get my foot in my mouth, you know. I get caught with that.
Yeah.
So it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing.
You know, we all inherit very complicated cultural scripts. And while we try to undo them on an individual level, and that can push the needle up to a certain extent, it is also a more collective level that these conversations need to happen on. And the reality is that even when these conversations happen on a collective level, they happen in the sense कि एक दिन एक यूटोपिया बनेगा जहाँ पे सब कुछ ठीक होगा. But the reality is that a lot of us live in the messy middle, where we have achieved some level of freedom, some level of autonomy to our ambition, but there is a lot of things that we are still straddling alongside that. And I wish more of us were comfortable complicating this conversation. You know, we work on a binary. Either you are an ambitious woman who is ambitious, or you are not an ambitious woman. Both things can be true. You can be ambitious but still find yourself locked into cultural scripts that are very hard to push out against. So when I get a lot of flack for this. I get a lot of flack for the idea of compromise. That there are times when you can't walk out. You know, saying that, oh, this very Western idea of like draw boundaries against your family. छित्तर पड़ेंगे घर पे अगर आप ऐसा करो बहुत बारी. It is okay to have an honest conversation about the realities around us, because that is how you have an honest conversation about how they change. You know, we follow such Western scripts of feminism, very narrow ideals of what ambition, what freedom, what growth looks like. That is not a reality for most women in India. It's you and I were very lucky to be from families that gave us as much freedom as we needed.
So your father is your force
Yeah.
behind you, or your mum?
Both.
Both.
Um,
Munde varga ya kudi vargi?
I asked my father this. I said, do you raise me as a son or a daughter? He said, I raise you as an adept human being. Who cares whether you're a son or a daughter? You know, sometimes I think he raises me as a butler, because जो भी करवाना है घर पे करवा लो. But that's the thing.
You still live with them?
हाँ जी. Not technically. I broke my knee, so I'm at home.
Oh,
Yes,
how?
getting. VC is a dangerous career. One of my own portfolio companies, I had an accident on one of their vehicles. So,
I hope you didn't give them a funding.
no, they had already received funding by then. At that point, I was more worried about ki press mein na chala jaye ki, you know. But that's the thing, right? Despite having as much freedom as I asked for, there are still times I will hesitate about conversations which I know my parents don't mind having, but I wonder if I'm allowed to have them at all. And instead of trying to fight against them for it, can I have that conversation with them? Can we both grow together? It makes the conversation a lot slower. It makes the conversation a lot more complicated, because what I've realized, and this is a quote, I'm forgetting the author who wrote this, but it said, a boundary is not a wall. It's a bridge across which we can love each other. And how do you build boundaries like that versus trying to fight against everyone all the time is also a question I try to answer in my book. I don't know if I'll do a good enough job or not, but I hope I can at least start that conversation.
I'm sure you do a damn good job in that book. But if you were to pitch yourself, I mean, when you look at a deck, what is the first thing that you notice in a good pitch?
The vision you're trying to sell me. Every good startup, every good piece of technology, every good piece of consumer goods, you know, take skincare, take makeup, they don't add delight to your life. वो सोने पे सुहागा होता है. You solve a problem. You solve a problem that is so painful to me that the moment the problem solves, I have an immediate sense of relief. So when you sell me a vision of a reality in which your product solves a problem and creates relief, suddenly I see a new kind of world. And a lot of people think, oh, but I'm starting like a D2C brand. What problem can I solve? What pain can I solve? You can solve a lot of pains by creating products that make my life easier, by creating products that actually work, that by creating products that don't sell me a fantasy but sell me a reality. All those are real pains that can be solved. So when the first thing I ask a founder or I look in a deck is, tell me what pain your existence erases. And if you cannot articulate that, I don't want to fund you. I want to know the pain. I want to know how you are the relief. And I want to know how that relief makes us money. Very simple. And many founders will fumble when you ask them this, because we've been taught from day one that you must add to someone's life. That's not true. You must take away. You must take away pain. You must take away discomfort. You must take away anger, because that is how you make space for yourself in someone's life. If you are just an addition, you can be subtracted at any point.
Of course.
So it's the same heuristic across sectors, across people. When I hire, I don't hire for what this person can add to my team. I hire for what incredible pain point do I have that this person will come and take away from my plate. And that makes you hire better. It makes you hire for longevity, not just for like, oh, this project exists and I want this seen through. I want to hire people who grow with me, because at the end of the day, these are the people I'm going to be sitting with at 2 a.m. trying to solve a problem. I don't want to sit with someone who's superfluous. I want to sit with someone who's essential to my SWAT team. So everything in life has to solve a pain, bring relief, and
Make you money.
make you money. You can't remove that from the equation at
Well,
all.
I mean, basically, if you're able to give relief to a pain, by default, you make money.
Yeah. The reality is that if you manage to identify a pain and give relief, people will beg you कि मेरा पैसा ले लो, कि let me pay you for giving me this relief. And that is where like we talk so much faff about product market fit, you know. What does PMF look like? I remember one VC saying it's like falling in love. If you know, you know. No, it is simply that people want to pay you money for what you do to them. And that is rare because no one likes paying money at all. The richest and the poorest, no one likes paying money. So when you reach a point where they want to pay you money, you know you've got product market fit.
And that's very few.
As
Today,
it should be.
in this competitive world, it's
As it should be. You have to stand head and shoulders above someone for people to pay you money. And if you can't do that, you should either get good enough or you should question if you should exist.
And how would you make your own pitch?
जो भी काम है करवा दो करवा दे. Very genuinely, I think my pitch is, if you have a problem, I can probably solve it for you, whatever that problem is. And that's what a good generalist does. You know, we talk so much about specialist versus generalist, and
So, do you consult to startups?
yes, I advise
And
a lot
is
of startups.
it usually Gen Zs or it's across the board?
Across the board. My oldest founder today is 66. If I can add value, which in this case is if I can take away a pain for you, I'm very happy to consult. But you have to be okay with the kind of person I am, because when I talk to a founder, the first question I ask them is, you want puch puch or you want the truth? Because I can be abrupt, I can be abrasive, but I do that because I know what you need to hear. A lot of founders, especially today, you get a bit of funding, etc., you drink your own Kool-Aid. You start thinking you're essential because that's what you've told other people. You need someone to cut through that clutter and to be very honest with you. And if that is what you need, I'm your person. But if that is not what you need, find someone who is willing to parlay to your ego, which is also important. Sometimes you need those people around you. But if you want to grow, I tell this to all my founders, especially the ones I fund. You need to curate your critics. Not every critic is worth your time, but you cannot surround yourself with yes men because that leads to failure. You need to curate the kind of people you're willing to take very difficult feedback from without ego pe nahi lena. You know, we're talking about your product. After that, we'll go grab a drink. It'll be great.
I'm getting free advice.
But yeah, it's you need to be surrounded by people who don't look at you for your achievements, but for what you can still be. Because those are the people who will remind you that you have a lot more to do. Everybody else will be very happy talking up your achievements. But what is the point of such people? They are great to have around when you need a pick-me-up.
No, absolutely. I think that's in every walk of
Yeah,
life.
absolutely.
Not just
Every walk of life.
advising you with work. I think it's
Yeah.
for everything. You know, your children, your home, your everything. You need to have
But-
some harsh reality put across to you. Not maybe harsh, but just reality in its form.
Gurbani says it best, I think. Man niva mat uchi. You need to have a very high standard for yourself. And you need to be very low ego about it. That is the only way to grow, because that as that delta increases, the amount you can grow increases. And I rely a lot on Gurbani as an operator, as a writer. And more I've realized that it's these simple things that you're taught as a child, you know, especially if you grew up in a Sikh household, that form a very fundamental truth to the person you are.
I have this little attraction towards you because of our cultural.
Yes, of course. It's very important to have that.
What's a cultural moment that shaped your understanding of what a woman could be?
You know, it's not only about what a woman could be, but anger at what a woman is slotted into. When Kalpana Chawla's, when the rocket was coming down and there was breathless coverage of it on TV, and somebody did an entire segment on how she's a, wife and daughter, and what her parents and husband will feel, how her husband will feel when he's widowed. And I'm looking at the TV. I'm what, 12 maybe, younger even, and I'm like, वो मरने वाली है उसको उसको देखो ना. Why are you so worried about the people around her? And I realized, I think that was a very radicalizing moment for me, because I realized that a woman could go up to space, but she would be seen as a sum of her, whose wife she is and whose daughter she is.
And the mother she is.
Yeah, and she didn't have children at that time, but there was another conversation about what kind of children would Kalpana Chawla had if she had children. And it's infuriating on some level. And don't get me wrong, I love being my parents' daughter. I would love the idea of being a mother down the line. But that's not the sum of what I am.
That's not your identity.
Yeah. I am Harnid, who also happens to be X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing TV, and at that time, the entire conversation was, there was a period where they thought they could retrieve the situation, where they could, save the astronauts. Then they knew it's not going to happen. And I kept thinking that there's this woman up in space staring at certain death, knowing that the vehicle I'm in is going to enter the atmosphere and I'm going to disappear into ether. How would she feel when she's, if she heard how people are talking about her? That's not what I would have wanted to feel. It was a very
Jolting experience.
yes, it was very, I still think about it, I think about it when I talk to women around me, and I realize that I'm typecasting them too. These are very inherent biases. It's not like we are absolved from them. And when,
But sometimes you do it also to protect your own,
yeah, of course.
because you know that this may eventually happen.
Yeah.
And therefore I want to protect, it's just like I would speak about my daughter. I would like her to grow and grow and grow in whichever
Yeah.
way she wants to. But I also think that I'd like her to have a baby, and experience being a mother.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it sometimes, that thing comes up, the level of protection. Because at some point, I'm sure your parents, however they've raised you,
Yeah.
feel the same.
Of course they do. And that is what I encourage women to realize, that women are constantly surveilled. It might be surveillance of kindness also. The way your parents surveil you. They want the best for you. Which is why you must always assess intent. Are you being surveilled out of fear? Are you being surveilled out of worry? Are you being surveilled out of love? And then you negotiate each of those surveillances accordingly. You cannot have a blanket argument against everything. My parents say things to me which I may not fundamentally agree with, but they are my parents. It's okay. They are allowed to worry about me. They are allowed to care about me. It's a privilege to have someone love you and care about you, which is why I don't think you need to fight against everything. I think you need to ask yourself, is this a fight I want to have? And there are going to be fights you want to have. Go all in. But her cheese, to a carpenter, everything needs a hammer. You don't become a carpenter, be a person. Decide what you want to fight against, decide what you want to compromise with, and decide what you want to do with kindness instead of constant sense of aggrievement and victimhood. Because that also happens. You get very used to feeling angry.
But where has this come from? It can't be coming from seeing one incident in your life. Where has this come from? That feeling of having this sort of sisterhood. Where did it come from? It doesn't appear that it came from an experience you've had.
I grew up with no brothers.
Yeah.
It's two sisters. And every time I meet someone, they are like, "Acha, do behne hai?" I say, "Haan." And they said, "Bhai nahi hai." I'm like, "Haan." we grew up very early on being told that who cares, you know, like why you're our daughters, you are all we need. And over time, I realized that that was an anomaly, that most women weren't given that kind of confidence. And I asked why not? I was also very lucky to have a mother who has done her PhD on feminism in India.
On feminism.
In India, very
Wow,
specifically.
that's fantastic.
She wrote a book. It's called Male Image, Female Gaze. It's about how the theory she talks about is something called relational autonomy. How there might be a theory outside the both of us, but between us, we navigate that theory as two human beings, not as two academics. What does that look like for an Indian in a family of made up of a lot of boundaries, a lot of, complications? And we grew up having these conversations at home and we were allowed to ask questions. I think that was the biggest privilege that you could have as a young woman.
Also, it makes a big difference if the matriarch of the family is educated.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah, because that leads the family in a direction of security,
Absolutely.
and dynamism, that the world is there for you. Otherwise, I mean, I feel that the biggest thing that women can do for themselves is to educate themselves,
Oh,
because
100%.
it's not about what they learn. Like, I did my master's in mathematics, and many times over, my kids would ask me, Mama, what did you learn out of doing maths? How are you using your maths?
Yeah.
It's not that I'm using my math and knowing what, abstract algebra is about, but it puts you on a path of discipline and knowledge.
Absolutely.
And that itself, that training, prepares you for life ahead.
Absolutely.
As against, I mean, like, I know that there are a lot of startups out there and a lot of, entrepreneurs who are not educated. And which is also fine. They educate themselves in different ways. But the discipline of knowledge, and especially in India, with the matriarch,
Yeah.
is a big thing.
I have always believed that, I come from a stupidly privileged background, of course. My parents were well to do. We never had to worry about anything. But all that privilege aside, the biggest privilege was to have both parents very highly educated. My father was doing his, he had just joined his PhD when he gave the civil services. My mom did her PhD when I was 10. She started when I was 10, finished when I was 14. I saw my mother study.
Yeah.
I saw my mother take out time, have a notebook in hand, take down notes, do readings. It was something that was normal, to see someone study because they just love studying. I used to laugh, आप अपने पैर पे कुल्हाड़ी क्यों मार रहे हो, मुझे पढ़ना नहीं है, आप पढ़ते जा रहे हो. But seeing that as a norm and not an exception instills a couple of things in you. It instills a love of knowledge. You always want to know a little more. It creates a circumstance in which reading or absorbing some kind of media is not something you do at leisure. It is leisure. It is a part of your life. Picking up a book and sitting with it is not something that happens outside of life. Then it teaches you how to converse with each other. I see so many people whose entire conversation with their families is khana khaya, soye, move on with your life. No, we've always had such lively tables, fighting with each other over things. And it's a lot of fun. My favorite dinner company to date is probably my parents, because they are both so wickedly smart and so erudite. And that is the standard I hold myself up to.
Fantastic. Many women default to safety first. How did you discover that safety can actually be expensive? And how did you rewire that instinct?
It comes down to money. Women and men historically are taught two scripts. Even today, when somebody has a very ambitious, very well educated daughter, the first thing they tell her is, you keep your job, you keep earning money so that you can leave a circumstance. a man is taught that you must grow something, you know, आगे की generations के लिए आपको कुछ बनाना है, you have to achieve financial freedom, all of that. So we are taught from day one. Men are taught to be offensive with their money. We are taught to be very defensive with our money. So we put our money into tools like FDs. We put them into savings, liquidity, gold खरीद लो. Gold तो अब मतलब चलता ही है. You get a lot out of it. But things that you can liquidate very quickly. Men are taught to invest for the long term. Hold till you get a return on it. And the reality is men and women have the same tools. Men and women have the same access to education. But you are this instilled into you so hard that you must be defensive with your money. And that is very expensive. You are taught to be one of the things I was doing this math for my book recently, that how starting at a lower salary compounds over time. Say you go for a job interview and you get an offer for 25,000. A man will be told negotiate करो. A woman will be told अच्छा offer है, हाथ में है, घर के पास है, there's growth in career, ले लो. Man negotiates up to 30,000. Woman continues at 25,000. Now in the same organization, if you continue, your increment is going to be 10%. Now compound that over 5 years. The delta over 9 years on a 10,000 difference in starting salary is 9 lakhs. Think of how we are taught these scripts over time. And safety is very tangibly expensive. It is not a, ghocha, matlab, upar, up in the air. It's tangibly expensive, which is why more women need to be taught that risk is something they're allowed to take. More women need to be taught that अच्छा index fund में डालना है डालो, but थोड़ा सा research कर लो, थोड़ा सा high risk mutual fund में डाल लो. कोई ये नहीं बोल रहा कि बैठ के candles देखो ऊपर नीचे, but at least know your own risk appetite.
How would you advise say a 25-year-old girl if she had 1 lakh of rupees?
50% in index funds. बिना सोचे डाल दो, भूल जाओ, निकालना नहीं. आप 2 साल के नहीं डाल रहे, 3 साल के नहीं डाल रहे, आप 5 साल के लिए डाल रहे हो. उसके पहले उठाना नहीं, क्योंकि वो don't try to time the market. Put and forget. It is not for you. It is for future you. Put 30% into self-improvement. Do further studies. Learn, upskill, and spend 20% on yourself. You will never know the joy of spending money on yourself till you do it. Spend money on good clothes. Spend money on a good watch. Spend money on good makeup. Look good when you walk into a room so that you hold the room. Do not shy. A lot of women are told to shrink in. Itni loud lipstick क्यों लगाई है? ये क्यों किया है? Why do you have to spend so much money on yourself? You will never want to earn more till you don't taste the joy of being able to spend more. And that is, I love watches. My dream watch, which I'm working towards right now, is a Patek. It's going to take me a long time to reach there. But I want to spend that money. I want to have that because it feels like something that I would like to acquire. If you don't have big wants, how are you going to push yourself to reach those big wants?
Very good, because at this stage when I talk about wanting something, my son will say, Mom, just get it. If you don't get it now, when are you going to get it?
गलती से ही है. Like I tell my mother this, sometimes she'll be like, I want this, but कहाँ पहनूंगी? I'm like, bro, if you don't get it now and you don't wear it now, when are you going to?
And that holds true for any age, actually.
Absolutely.
Because the joy you get out of wearing something at that age is a different joy. Like, for instance, when I was in my 20s, I loved different colors of shoes.
Yeah.
I was modeling. And I just loved yellow and green and pink and orange, and besides the black and white and beige. And I bought them all for myself and I enjoyed them. But I'm not looking at them today.
So a lot of people will say, oh, this is so materialist. But yes, it is. You live in a material world, might as well enjoy it, There is such... A lot of people will tell you money can't buy happiness. I actively disagree. I'm so happy when I look at my watch collection. I'm so happy when I go and, I open my laptop and it's the best the money can buy. All these things give me joy. Why? And to deny yourself that because you've been told that it's materialistic is a little silly, मतलब जस्ट बिकॉज यू आर वरीड अबाउट व्हाट समबडी एल्स विल से, अपने घर के अंदर आप अपने आप को छोटा करते जाओ, वेस्ट ऑफ टाइम.
A waste of time. Tell me what is to see, or to what I have learned, that you are the princess of startups. Or maybe I've just given that phrase to you.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
There you go. What is the advice you would give to a Gen Z versus a non-Gen Z and an older person?
Start. A lot of people will tell you you're too early or you're too late. But that implies there's a right age, and that never seems to come. You have an idea, you just have to start. And you have to take that punt. You know, a lot of people hedge themselves a lot, that I will try to build this, then I will quit, then I will try to sell it. You can't. You have to do it all together. If you are your own first investor, no, if you don't put in the time, effort, the sacrifice required to build something, why should I as an investor invest in you? And there is no right age. I have some of the best founders I know are over the age of 50. Data shows that the most successful founders start after 40 and are usually second time founders. We valorize the youth because it makes for a good story. It doesn't matter. At some point, you have to just choose your ambition over your fear.
And how do you define a startup?
So, Paul Graham has a beautiful definition about it, which is that a startup is anything that is designed to grow very fast. He calls it the sequoia seeds. So, you take two seeds, a sequoia redwood and a normal redwood. A normal redwood also grows, but it stops, it caps. A sequoia can grow infinitely, it never stops growing. That is what defines a startup, the ability to grow and scale at a rapid pace for a sustained amount of time.
But there are some pitfalls. There are some times where you fall.
No, but a myth is always written in retrospect. You know you fall. Nobody else will know. Down the line, they will just see your success. You know, and this is something I tell a lot of people when they ask, you know, this decision is scaring me, this, that. Do it for the plot. Do it. I have a mental biography written in my head where I will take a decision which sounds insane, but I'm like, book mein acha lagega, kisi din acha lagega. So, do it for the plot, do it for the mythology you want to build around yourself. At some point, you have to stop taking yourself so seriously. Let your joy and ambition shine through your fear and hesitation, and magic happens. It sounds like I'm talking a lot of faff, but these are very tangible realities. You know, our brain shapes our tangibility. Our neurons mold themselves around our beliefs. Science shows this. So if you can't imagine yourself successful, if you can't imagine yourself a figure of mythology, you will never be able to be one.
I agree with that. I agree with creating manifestations for yourself and getting there.
Yeah.
What is the percentage of women entrepreneurs versus men that you have supported or
Abysmal. We support. I have in my personal sort of advisory portfolio, I almost exclusively support women. But in terms of the funding we've done, 6 out of 18. It is truly terrible. It is
6 out of
18. Probably even fewer in the coming cohort.
6
Yeah.
are women.
6 are co-founded, like their startups co-founded or founded by women. And I think it's tragic and abysmal, and it infuriates me. It's an open call. Any woman who wants to start up, you want to solve a problem, you come to me. I will help you. So many women I know have brilliant ideas. They keep waiting for a sign from the universe. This is your sign. Build. There are people desperate to support you. You know, I've been working with FICCI, which is, you know, the federation. It's a governmental body. We have a new Women in Startups committee, subcommittee there. And we are trying to build out a narrative for women founders. And you realize that all of this is nothing if the woman who has to build doesn't start building. So, and that's another thing.
I think apart from just giving her support of business and funding and direction, I think more so she needs support to be told that she can do it.
Yeah.
With the vis-a-vis the family structure,
Absolutely.
the kids, the husband, the boyfriend, the parents, the society.
Absolutely.
That break away from that.
That's what I'm saying. If you're a young woman, you're watching this, you want to know how to navigate that. How do you maintain or manage your existing sort of responsibilities and you still build? You come to me. I will help you. I will come to your house and cook for you if that's what's required so that you can go and build. I don't care what it takes. I just want to see more women building. And I want to see more women building like they are supposed to be building. I think women still consider themselves an exception when they build.
I mean, there are so many things, in where women experience challenges. If, for instance, with my experience, when I was in my 20s, I was doing my master's in mathematics. I was a Miss India.
Yeah.
It was literally like when I'd walk into class, my professor would say, he didn't like me at all.
Of course he did.
Because I was a Miss India and I'd enter with my hair open. And it was, that time masters in mathematics was not such a, like it was geekish.
Yeah.
And he said it to me as I walked into class that distract karne aa jati hai. And here I had the love for the subject, and that's why I did it. And I didn't know which other subject would interest me.
Yeah.
So, but along the way, my father wanted me to run the company where, he had founded and
Yeah.
made Frick India. And I, of course, chose to get into the glamour world and model and this and that, which was okay. But there's so many things that I had, issues that I had along the way, just so that the person sitting across the room didn't think of me being a dumb blonde or a bimbat because I was a model.
Yep.
And, to say that, hey, I'm probably 10 times smarter than your stuff between your ears.
Yeah.
But it was for a long time a challenge for me till I found my own, my own way of doing my business, and I
Yeah.
started my jewelry business. And here I was, brought up pretty much like a confident young woman. And I look at it all around me, how even if you're a pretty girl or, how you can be just put into a bracket that you don't belong here.
I had joined a startup and I was building out new businesses with them. And I had to go and speak to engineers about something I needed to get them to build. And the engineers wouldn't respond. And, ek baar bola, do baar bola, teen baar bola. Then I finally called the lead engineer and I said, boss, what is happening? I'm sending you my product requirement documents. I'm doing all of this. Why are you not responding to me? And he said, the team thinks you're an influencer. I was like, I am, but I also am your product manager. You're going to have to deal with it. And I think more women need to learn shamelessness as a virtue. I think we are so used to apologizing that, oh, I'm sorry, I'm Miss India. Like, it is an achievement. You reached from what, an average of 6,000 applicants, and you won a pageant, and you were given a scholarship, and you got to travel the country, and you got to represent the country. That is an achievement unto itself. Just because it's not an achievement a man thinks of as one doesn't make it any less of one. And I think so many women are so used to apologizing for an achievement that may not look like the standard idea of a masculine coded achievement. My request to all such women is, थोड़ी सी बेशर्मी सीख लो. I took to actively recording in office. I said, okay, you think I'm an influencer? Let me show you what an influencer does. It doesn't make me any less of a professional. It just makes me smarter than you because I can multitask and do two things really well. And the sooner you realize that it is not a net negative but a net positive that you can do multiple things, the sooner you get a backbone for yourself. Too many women apologize too much because they are so scared of rocking the boat. They think if I just apologize, we can move on from this quickly. Why? Let's sit and talk. You that is the thing, women are so afraid of taking time and space. They think that if I quickly apologize and move on with my life, nobody will call me inconvenient. I would rather be known as inconvenient than someone who shrinks. As simple as that.
On a side note, have you made mistakes while giving funding to startups?
Of course. See, VC between us and everyone, I guess, VC is institutionalized gambling. You take 10 punts, one works, and that returns your fund 3x. It's pray and pray. You allocate small amounts of money in as many different risk segments as you can, hoping one of them pays off. A lot of us have a lot of scientific theories about it, but it's also as much a game of luck and time and circumstance as it is about skill. So, of course, you're going to make mistakes, but I don't think they're mistakes. I think they are learnings.
But where did this startup culture come from?
In what sense? In India?
I mean, right now, it's like a virus. It's everywhere.
I think
where did it come from, and where is all this money to invest in startups come from?
So, how startup investing works is actually a lot of people think it's some magic thing happening. ऐसा कुछ है नहीं. So, there are usually HNIs or institutions. They could be pension funds, they could be sovereign funds, they could be, ultra high net individuals who already have their allocations in various safe assets. They have invested in mutual funds, they have invested in index funds, they have invested in growth opportunities like say solar, or they have access to opportunities like investing in oil fields that you and I may not have access to.
Blue chip companies.
Yeah. And they usually invest at a level that we cannot because these companies are private in nature. So they take money and it's an internal funding raise. They usually put a certain percentage, a small percentage of their entire allocation into very high risk, high growth opportunities. One of them is venture funds. These are called limited partners, LPs. Now, limited partners give people like me money. And they say, look, boss, you seem to know enough folks in the startup ecosystem. You seem to have enough access to them. Allocate this money in them and give me returns. This is the most difficult asset in the world. Nobody should do angel investing unless and until you know what you're doing, because you will lose all your money. People like us hedge that risk for these HNIs. We take money from multiple such people, make a kitty, and start investing in startups. Now, this is almost, there is something called high risk, high reward. This is all risk, very low reward. One company may 100 and 1000x, but the likelihood of that happening is vanishingly low. This is them putting a very small percentage of their allocation into a maybe we get to invest in the future. But you have to remember, for most such institutions and ultra high net individuals, this is less than 5% of their allocation. The amount of venture funding that exists in the world, cumulatively, by the way, is less than 12% of what every pension fund in the world looks like. This is a very, very small field, very early in its game. But the thing is, it's very dramatic. It's very aspirational.
And very exciting.
Very exciting, which is why you think it's everywhere.
Yeah.
In fact, it is so vanishingly small in absolute terms that it's not a blip on the global sort of economic reality. वो pension funds जो पैसे डालते हैं, sovereign funds पैसे डालते हैं, तेरा shipping में जितना पैसा है, that is real money. We play with magic monopoly money, little money, but it's so fun. The idea of, one of my mentors once said it. He said, when you do venture investing, you get to see the future before everyone else, just like 1 minute before everyone else. That is what makes it so attractive, because you think the person who's building in front of you is doing something that you couldn't do. That is what makes it so exciting, and which is why it feels like it's everywhere. Of course, still very recently, till not even 5 years ago, this is what nerds did. You know, we were called idiots for doing what we do. And then Shark Tank happened. And then suddenly entrepreneurship became a very valid sort of career.
to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it became a thing to do. It became, instead of, like, I remember talking to a friend about this who said, till before Shark Tank came, my parents were so ashamed of telling people I run a startup. They would say, exam ki tayari kar raha hai. And now they are so proud of it. So the entire narrative changed around it. And then suddenly you had, like, now you have courses. You pay us 5,000 and we'll teach you how to become an entrepreneur. ऐसा कुछ होता तो मतलब we would be the biggest beneficiaries of it. It is exciting because it shows us that we are still capable of innovation. That life is not what exists in front of us, there can be more. That is what people care about, and that is why it gets so much hype around it.
But like for somebody like me who has a pulse, say, about skincare, I mean, I know by just knowing
Yeah.
how this product is going to work and how much it's going to transform a woman, not only her skin, but her mindset. Do you also get, like, I feel I have the instinct, that's why I got into it. Do you feel that you have an instinct to what kind of startup would work, can be successful, yes? Or
I think most of us have instincts about founders. The thing with technology is that anyone can build anything. Today, you start building something, and then Google comes and builds it, and you're kind of gone, you know, because somebody with so much more distribution is doing the same thing. We develop, and I don't think any of us are born with it, but over time, as we do investments, as we do funding, we develop a gut feel about the kind of founders we back. We back people who are very malleable, who are very driven to taking feedback and implementing it, who are very resilient, who are very, very capable of taking pivots as and when required. Those people, they're like weeds. They will succeed whether you want them to or not. Very often when there's a founder, we are in two minds about, you know, me and my team. We ask ourselves, would we want to bet on this founder or against this founder? And sometimes we're like, we can't bet against this founder. This person will do something great. We just want to be on the ride with them. I don't think any of us can tell. There are, of course, far smarter people than me who maybe can, but I can't. I can't tell if technology is the moat, but I can tell with fair certainty if the founder is the moat. And that is what my skill set is, I would say.
yeah, you're absolutely right. Because I remember when I got into this, I got into it with a passion driven towards
Yeah.
beauty. I didn't even think of investment. I didn't think of making it
Yeah.
private limited. I didn't think of getting funding in. Nothing.
It's
I was just driven to make something.
there's a word for it in Urdu, fitur. You know, every founder I know is a fituri about what they are doing.
Yeah, and they believe in it.
They believe in it
Yeah.
to the point of, so there's a Maslow's hierarchy, right? You're like, अच्छा रोटी कपड़ा मकान होना चाहिए, फिर हम देखेंगे कि ऊपर का क्या जाता है. Every founder appends that. Every founder says, roti kapda makan chhod do, I want to chase an ambition. It is the greatest upheaval of human tendency. Anyone says, I want to be a founder, I ask them, why? अपनी जिंदगी क्यों खराब करना चाहते हो? But a fituri doesn't let it stop them. They say, this is such a burn in me. I have to get this idea into the world. You can't bet against that kind of human drive, you know, and that is what we put our money on.
So when I got my funding, everybody told me that we don't want to know the numbers. We're just putting it on you.
Yeah, that's the
And I
truth.
remember that, and I didn't understand that. Today I do 3 years down the line. But what's the most unconventional pitch you have ever funded or wanted to fund?
Right now, so wanted to fund, I've had the privilege of funding insane ideas, and I'm so proud that we've been able to do that. But the one thing that I heard, there was a 19-year-old who came to me and said, I want to work in nuclear recycling. And I said, one, what? Two, you're 19. And he said, so I can do it. I didn't end up funding him at that time because he was very theoretical, but we're still in touch, and I hope to fund him down the line.
How old is he now?
He's still 19. It's been a long 19 for him. But I think one of the cool things that's happening is that our government has actually gone above and beyond in opening up sectors that were previously shut to private investments. So this year, in fact, this quarter, two very large laws changed. Till now, if a nuclear accident occurred, the supplier was liable, which meant nobody wanted to sell nuclear material to India, right? Why should I take that on myself? Now the operator is liable. And second, the government has opened 100% private investment in nuclear energy. Till today, they said it's a matter of national security. We can't have someone private own a nuclear plant. Now they're saying we're open to it.
Oh.
Now an entire, so look, you and I can't set up a plant that your Reliance, etc. will do. But there's an entire economy that's going to grow around it. Something as small as building suits. Because the people who go into these plants are
A
going
little
to
township.
yeah. So you have to build townships, you're going to have to build water purifiers, you're going to have to build heat dissipation technologies.
Air filters.
An entire whole category has now opened, and I'm so excited to fund that in the next couple of years, because I think if we have to be energy independent in a country as big as India, nuclear is one of the only ways to do it. So, and now that the government has allowed us to participate in that story, I think I'm very excited about it.
So this boy has some hope.
I can't wait. I'm waiting for him to give me one result, and I will put all my personal money on him. I don't care.
Give me some golden advice on how you'd scale up a startup. Like you told me, a startup is something that is going to grow, it's going to scale up. What is a golden advice? One or two
Always
pieces of
yeah.
advice.
Number one, never do it for free. A lot of people think that, oh, if I give my services or products for free, tomorrow people will pay for it. Nobody wants to pay for something they've already received for free. Always, you need to know how much money you can charge. Because if you can't charge money, you're in trouble. So always have people pay for what you're doing. Number two,
But give them value add. Otherwise, in skincare, for instance, if you give things for, if you start charging and not give them that value added free thing.
value add is different. The base product they should pay for. This is true for software, this is true for skincare, this is true for clothing. Nobody, if you send me something for free, the chances of me converting to a paying customer, a lot of people think are very high. But data shows it's actually very low. I don't want to pay for something I got once for free. It makes me feel bad about myself. And at the end of the day, people who buy are not rational customers. I think a lot of founders truly believe that their market is a rational market. Human beings are fundamentally irrational customers. Most economics collapses on its face because human beings are not rational purchasers. So you have to work on irrationality as your baseline, which is why charging money is very important. Number two, localize. You cannot expect to sell the same thing to everyone and get the same result. A really fine example of this is what Domino's did. Domino's, till about 4 years ago, was struggling. They couldn't sell in India. Then they started doing a dal makhani pizza in like North India, and they started doing like localized pizzas all over the country, and suddenly their sales exploded. Every customer in every different geography is very different. Either you learn how to speak their language, or you build a product that is universally translatable. The latter is very, very difficult to do. Number three, remember that your customer doesn't really want to be there. Your customer doesn't want to pay you money. You have to be irreplaceable to them in some way or form. You have to become an intrinsic part of their fabric. If you can't do that, they will walk away. If you can get these three right, the chances of you succeeding are very, very high. And the reality is that it's very easy to say this. Doing this will break most people's backs. But if you have to scale, you have to do it in a way that you can sustainably scale. A lot of people think, oh, we'll give like deep discounting, this, that, scale. At some point, we'll reach a point where people start paying me. That is what a lot of venture money is used for, right? You scale without worrying about revenue. There's a 50-50 chance of that succeeding or not. If you want to be guaranteed a success, you have to do it the hard way, the boring way. And that is also a very fundamental reality. Most of the shit you do is going to be so boring. It is going to be you versus an Excel sheet. It can't always be a thrill. If you are not comfortable with the boring bits of running a business, you don't get to celebrate the exciting bits of running a business.
Remind me to ask you something when this podcast is over.
Done.
Okay, so that is in your experience.
Yeah.
Some of the golden rules to scale up.
Yep.
And when startups start using investors' money and burning it to achieve a certain top line number as against the bottom line, how important is it to the investor today or just the VC or PE or whatever, the top line number versus your EBITDA?
Till very recently, a lot of VCs didn't care about top line. Why? Because VC is a game of hot potato. I'm an early stage fund. I invest in you. Now you raise more money because your top line has increased, but the bottom line is at an absolute mess. But a larger fund will start funding you, and I will sell my shares as secondaries to them. So I offload that and I get a neat little exit. So it was a game of hot potato till you could stretch it out. But now we've reached a point, especially in India, where now startups are listing, which is why your bottom line matters, your EBITDA matters, because retail investors are not VCs that can play hot potato with the stock. Now investors care. Also post-COVID investors care because we were beaten as an industry. We realized that we lived in a bubble and that bubble had to burst. For us, a lot of us, the bubble burst during COVID. And now we care about the bottom line, and I'm glad we do. I think we all deserve to live in a world with sustainable businesses that don't work on exploitation of the retail customer
Yeah.
or the retail investor. And I'm glad that we have realized that sooner rather than later, because I would never want to offload a stock onto a retail investor that I know they will never get value out of. It's a net negative for all of us.
Yes, I'm happy to hear that because I've come from that thought
Yeah.
that about my EBITDA is very, very precious to me. But at the same time, I'm always given advice that focus on your top line.
Again, it depends on the kind of investor and kind of founder you are. If you're comfortable playing hot potato, it's you do it. But I'm very excited to see like a new generation of investors who don't want to do that. They want to support sustainable businesses. And I think it's a very good shift for all of us as a community, as an industry.
And tell me, what's your, how much focus do you give on community building?
A lot. See, at the end of the day, community is a very abused word. What you are fundamentally looking for is evangelists. Somebody who can stand in your place and sell your product like you would, right? People confuse these two. People think if I have X number of followers on Instagram, I have a community. How many of those X number of followers would go and sell your product on your behalf without being paid for it? That is what you're looking for. And the moment you disabuse yourself of this notion that metrics equals community, I think that is when you start asking the tougher questions on what community means to me. People chase metrics like, oh, kitna reel viral hua, kitne followers hue, what's our growth rate, how many impressions do we have? How many of that converts to a click-through ratio? How many of those click-through ratios convert to purchase? CTR on average on Instagram for a well-performing influencer above like 500,000 is less than 1%. Now sub 1% का fraction आप ले लो, उतने लोग खरीद रहे हैं आपका product. क्या फायदा? We get so caught up in metrics because they are a very easy cop-out. If the metrics look good on paper, the agency is happy, the founder is happy, the investor is happy. Let's complicate the conversation behind those metrics a bit. No, let's ask what those metrics actually lead to. If we don't ask that, we all again come back to drinking our own Kool-Aid. in which we all are very happy because we got 1.5 million impressions on a reel. What does it lead to? What does it mean? Recently, there was a reel by a hospitality brand that broke a trillion. No, broke a billion, my bad. 1.5 billion. Now I think it's at 3.5 billion. You know what the conversion rate on that has been? Less than 0.01%. ठीक है, you got a billion on an impression. To what end? What outcome did
What
it
does
lead
that
to?
mean, though? It means that people just were entertained?
No, it means that they put a lot of ad budget on it and it reached more people's feeds. That's it. Nothing else. Sure, it's going to go into their quarterly presentation to their board and say we broke the record for the most viewed reel on Instagram. Okay, and what did it lead to? We are very scared of asking for outcomes.
But that
from-
is because of boosting Instagram.
yeah, that is what, right? They boosted it. ठीक है, 1 billion आ गया, कमाल हो गया. Okay, and what? At the end of the day, your community is going to stick by you when you don't run ads, when you don't give discounts. They will come to you and volunteer feedback to you. They will come to you and tell you, hey, founder, I think you could do this better.
But
No,
isn't D2C about giving discounts?
no. That's because everyone else around you does it.
But there are sales.
There are sales because everyone around you does it. Augustine Bader doesn't go on sale. Lamar doesn't go on sale. Augustine Bader today retails on Tira for 1,50,000 rupees. जब मैंने देखा मुझे लगा टाइपो है. लोग खरीदते हैं. The reality is if you don't want to go on sale, you don't have to go on sale. You just think you have to go on sale constantly because everyone around you does it. So
Yeah,
you
and
feel-
then it's competition.
yeah, it's mimetics, right? It's mimetic theory that if my competitor does XYZ, I must too do XYZ. You can choose not to do it. Yes, it's going to take you longer to grow. Yes, it's going to get your community a little bit pissed off because, oh, XYZ brand offers a discount. Why don't you? But you don't see a Van Cleef being like, oh, autumn discount. And Van Cleef didn't start as Van Cleef, right? It started off as a jewelry brand. Alhambra was one of their breakouts in early 20th century. You don't see, I don't know, you don't see Vichy going on discounts. These are all brands that started as brands. They didn't start as identities or movements. Just because we are so used to falling back on mimetics, it reduces our decision fatigue. It takes a lot of courage to say, I will not go on a 50% off during monsoon sale. If I was going to start a brand, I would not discount it. I would say if you are a long-term customer, please feel free to reach out to us and we will give you an additional product. But we don't want to discount it because we don't want to ever compromise on quality. And if we discount, we will have to compromise. And if I had a good enough community, they would cheer that decision on instead of tell me I'm doing something wrong.
Or lose loyalty. Or shift to another brand.
Again, if you constantly work on an axis of fear versus an axis of inclusion, you are going to constantly be on a back foot. Do you stand by your product and by your community and by your brand story hard enough that you're willing to put your money where your mouth is? And that is not easy. That is never going to be
It's
easy.
never easy, yeah. So your posts blend vulnerability and expertise. How do you decide what's worth sharing versus what stays private?
If it impacts me, I put it out in the world. If it breaches someone else's privacy or confidentiality, I do not put it out into the world. My sister and I got on Instagram, on internet, way too early. We are permanently scarred by it. Nobody knew what the internet was when we got on it. And our father just gave us free access to
Your
a
sister's older or younger?
younger. She's 4 years younger. And, both of us got on the internet and these were the badlands.
What does she do?
She currently works at Apple. She's now quitting to start her own thing.
She currently works at?
Apple.
Oh, at Apple.
Yeah. So, we got on the internet super, super young. At a time when no guidelines or guardrails existed like they do today. And our parents put a blanket rule for us. They said, if it is something you don't want to discuss in the living room, don't put it out on the internet. And I think that's such a smart rule to give a kid. it made very clear, like, would I talk about this to my mom when we're all hanging out for like chai in the afternoon? No, then it shouldn't be on the internet. They made it so simple for us, you know. A good rule is one that is easily understood. And this was the most easy rule to understand. Mama Papa wouldn't be happy if I spoke about like bodily functions on the internet. They wouldn't be happy if I spoke to strangers. They wouldn't be happy if I told people my deepest, darkest secrets. And honestly, to date, I follow that rule. If I can't discuss it with my parents when we are having tea in the afternoon, it cannot go on the internet. Full stop.
So this girls' club, when is it coming out?
So, in fact, my editor and I just spoke about this today. She was like, "You're writing too fast." I said, "Yes." I was like, "How
How
many
thick
times?"
is the book?
Oh my god. So it's supposed to be about 70,000 words, but I have already written 1,50,000. But my rationale
1,50,000 makes it how many pages?
right now it's 400 pages.
Oh.
But like my rationale is, when you get a pair of pants, is it easier for you to hem a long pair of pants or to lengthen a short pair of pants? So I'm like, you can hem it. Like you can't write more, right? So yeah. So we were supposed to launch it in August next year, but looks like March or April is when we're going to launch it.
Next year.
Yes. So that's not too far away. I am 70% done with writing the book.
And how come a book? Considering you're an internet girl and
You know, I have something called a theory of making, which I'm obsessed with.
are you a reader?
I am in 9th grade, I was banned from buying books. My mother just said, मेरे पास जगह नहीं है, मैं फेंक दूंगी. So yeah. But it's a family tradition. My mom is a fabulous author. She's written 3 books.
You're giving me the sick next door.
Yes, I am. It is a fantastic book. It's one of those books.
Thick book, thin book.
Thin book, not too long. She wrote it, honestly, for us. She wrote it because we are 6 who grew up in Maharashtra. My mom grew up in Kashmir. My dad grew up in Bihar. We are not from Ludhiana. We are not from Jalandhar. You know, we have family there, but we don't identify with those places. Who are we? Who are we as 6? She wrote it for us in many ways. But yeah, why a book? I think all human beings were made to create, and not just online. We were made to create with our hands, which is why it is so grounding for us to do pottery or to cook with our hands or to bake a loaf of bread
Or to read a book.
or to read a book, to hold something very tangible in your hands. We were evolutionary designed for it. That's why we have opposable thumbs. That's why we can stand upright and pick things up. Which is why I wanted a very tangible physical thing to come out of this work. Plus, it's very cool to say you wrote a book. You know?
I really want you to meet my daughter.
I will.
I'm sending her to you.
Yes.
Marriage?
Eventually, I have always wanted to be a mother, a wife. In fact, over years, I've realized I don't care about a wedding. I want a marriage. That's what I'm excited about. And that too because I saw a very healthy marriage being modeled to me with my parents. You know, they were partners, which makes you want to marry, which makes you want to have what they had. And I hope to soon. If anyone's single, let me know. But no,
Would you marry a Sikh or you open to
I would marry anyone. I would marry a partner. I would marry someone who is comfortable with the fact that,
with your growth.
yes, with my growth, and who has a sense of growth to themselves. I think
I'll put it in your matrimonial in Ludhiana.
No, I've actually seen like so many of my friends. I'm 30 now, which means a lot of my friends have gotten married, and a few of them are now divorced. And the biggest friction I've seen in all of them is that they had mismatched sense of ambition and the kind of life they wanted to live. It was rarely about class, about religion, about family. It was about an absolute mismatch in the kind of life that they wanted to build for themselves.
That is the new generation.
Yeah.
In the earlier generation, the girl just fitted into the boys.
Exactly. And I have seen this happen so many times in front of me that a man just couldn't, either he couldn't stomach the woman having an ambition at all, or his ambition felt dwarfed next to hers and he started resenting her. I that is something that I'm very conscious of, you know.
I mean, it's going to be a
It's going to be an
very
uphill.
uphill
know.
battle to
I know.
compete, not compete, but even to level up with you.
Yeah.
You just got to like let it happen
Yeah. And, I see
and enjoy it.
yeah, I see how my dad was with my mom.
Mm.
My mom didn't know how to type. So mama would research every day and write down notes in pen. And he would come back from work
And type.
and type. He typed her entire PhD thesis out twice.
Sweet.
And then I'm like, I saw that being modeled in front of me. Why should I hope for any lesser?
Mm.
I, if I'm single, I blame him for it. But yeah, it's a fact. You see something like
Yeah,
that
of
being
course, standards.
yeah, you see something like that being modeled in front of you, and you ask yourself if that exists.
Give the guy a chance.
But
Not
yeah,
all guys are good typists,
but yeah, no. I have always wanted to be a mom. I've always wanted to be a wife. I think every smart person should have children.
Make time for it.
I will. I'm hoping to hopefully get married next year. But yeah, it's something that I take very, very seriously. I take it very seriously because I think, and again, coming back to Sikhism on it, you can't become a Granthi or you can't be any kind of religious leader if you don't have a Grihasti. Because our guru said that if you can't manage your home, if you can't provide and take care of your family, how can you lead a community? I think that applies to all of us. If you don't have it in you to manage a grihasti, if you don't have that grounding, that anchoring to what you do, a place to come home to, you can be adrift. And I don't want that.
Second thing I have to talk to you after the podcast.
But yeah, that's something I really firmly believe in.
Good, great. I mean, it's great. In the age of tweets and reels, what made you want 50,000 words to say what you need to say?
I am a yapper. I talk a lot. But I also very firmly believe that I think more and more people are very fatigued by consuming short form content that doesn't allow them to think. The thing with short form content is you consume, but you rarely get a chance to sit with it and wonder how it makes you feel. I write on my Substack. I have 8,000 followers on my Substack. Not one of my Substack posts has been less than 4,000 words. People sit and read it, and people talk to me. I get such thoughtful conversation around it. People talk about whether they disagree with me or not. And it's a very civilized place on the internet, No one's yelling at each other. Everyone is willing to have a conversation. And that's because it slows the pace down. When you sit and you read something long form versus being bombarded by stimulus, you give yourself time to think, which is more important today than ever.
You've given me a young 30-year-old has given me a lot to think about. Well, anyway, let's start with rapid fire. Pick one pitch deck or poetry book.
The Girls Are Coming Out of the Woods by Tishani Doshi. It is a poetry book. That is my pitch deck for life. I'm a poet at heart, always.
That's lovely. One startup idea you'd never fund.
Gambling of any sort.
I was never allowed to model for tobacco or alcohol. Rules.
I get it. I would not. Real money gaming is my hard line. I refuse to.
A money rule you live by.
Spend to make.
Delhi winter or Mumbai rains.
Nanke is Delhi, Kar is Bombay, so I get both. I don't have to choose.
Okay. One Gen Z stereotype that's totally true.
Oh, they're so tough to work with.
Why?
I think it's a conflict. I think Gen Z has stopped taking shit. A lot of things that we just took for granted, that you go through the pain of it. And that's a good thing. That's a net good. But I think there's a transition phase in which we are learning how to reform our ways as employers and as bosses, and they are learning how to be good employees and teammates. And that phase of friction is going to be a painful period for everyone involved, as is all evolution.
One common financial advice you think is pure BS.
FD karwao. Stop it. You could just put it in a bank, it gives you the same return. Who cares? Just put money, make money work for you. A lot of people just save money because what? It's a rainy day thing. Bro, mutual funds take 3 days to withdraw. It's okay, you'll get your money. There's enough liquidity in the world. Stop putting money in defensive positions. Make money for you.
The most absurd pitch line you've ever heard.
Pet dating, Tinder for dogs. I was like, why? And he said, my dog is lonely. And I said, how do you know?
Biggest red flag in a founder's pitch.
I. Do you want to be a founder because you want to solve a problem, or do you want to be a founder because you want to be a founder? Very thin but very distinct line.
If you could make one money habit compulsory for Gen Z, what would it be?
Learn money. Learn how it moves. Learn how it works. Don't offload things onto someone else. Take ownership for your money decisions. Even if it is as little as spending an hour every quarter looking at your mutual fund returns and reallocating money. Take ownership over the destiny of your capital.
Finish the sentence. The girls' club is really about.
What I needed to hear when I was 19.
Nice. What's the story you almost didn't include in your but knew you had to?
A lot of them, actually. My parents hate me talking about them. They're like, you make a fantasy out of us, but I think they feature very prominently in my book, because whether they like it or not, I think they inspired so much of the person I am and so much of what I want from my life that they deserve to be there.
And that's all good. That's all good stuff.
Yeah.
And that's respect to them. What does inner growth mean to you?
Unlearning. You're taught from very young to talk down to yourself. Why am I not thin enough? Why am I not pretty enough? Why am I not smart enough? Self growth is unlearning that down talk and learning that you can exist in neutrality with yourself. You don't have to love yourself to the end of the world. You don't have to hate yourself to the end of the world. You can also just exist in stasis and be at peace. I'm a work in progress and I hope to reach there someday.
I mean, I would say that you're pretty much close to reaching there. What version of yourself are you actively growing out of right now?
Out of the broken knee version. I'm slowly recovering from surgery.
That is terrible that you broke
yeah.
your knee.
Yeah,
When was it?
April. Then I got surgery done.
Can you?
Yeah, now
completely-
till 2 weeks ago I was in a brace and with a soti.
Oh,
Now I
my
can
God.
move around a bit without it. But
That's a long time.
it was something. No, I didn't expect it. Nobody expects to be immobile. I was the kind of person taking like 5 flights a month, going to places, talking to founders, always on my feet, always like on the move, go.
And it just
Yeah, and suddenly I was grounded. And
learning from. Did you get a learning from it?
oh my God, I'm terrible company when I'm grounded. I can be a horrible person when I'm put into a situation I can't leave, which is something to learn how to get better at it. But other than that, I got to spend a lot of time with my parents after a very long time. And that was,
Like COVID.
yeah, like COVID. But in a very different way, because the last couple of years for me was coming into myself as a fund head, as, an independent person. And our equation has changed for the better. We look at each other as adults. To some level, to an extent. But yeah, other than that, I think what I learned was that I can really push through and get things done. I wrote 70% of a book. I pushed through and I got it done because I wanted to get it done in this time. I learned that I have a well of zid in me that I can implement to my benefit. It was a good thing to know about myself.
And in your journey of being this entrepreneur, do you have any personal don'ts for yourself?
Do no harm, take no shit, be kind. I will never want to fund, build, engage with something that actively harms other people. Um, I will always try to look at the world with a lens of kindness. Everyone is fighting through their own battles, everyone is fighting through their own realities. To claim that mine is the only one is such falseness. And of course, I'm done with trying to make myself smaller to make other people more comfortable. And these are rules that I hope that these are rules I try to stick to. I will never claim I've done a 100% job on it. Of course, I've hurt people. Of course, I've been unkind. Of course, I've shrunk. But the goal always is to live. If you don't have ideals you can't live up to, they're just realities.
Chardi kalach.
Exactly. Exactly. You have to constantly drive yourself to be a better person than you were yesterday. So it's a WIP always.
Great talking to you.
Thank you for having me.
No, great. What's your nickname?
Chia.
I knew because all Sardarnis have a nickname.
Yes, we do.
So Chia is a good, sweet little name.
Yeah, it was Chidiya because my dad was, I think he was really excited to be a dad. He was like, yeah, I'm a dad. So yeah, that's how me and my sister got our names, Harnid and Sukhnid. He spent like months researching.
And Harnit means?
Har means God, Hari.
Yeah.
Nidh means Nidhi, treasure. So God's treasure. Both Harnid and Sukhnid are from Gurbani.
Well, lovely to have you
Thank you
on
for
Be
having me.
Banter. And I'm glad that we had this podcast. And you have a lot to share. And a lot to share and sort of because you have a nice way of communicating and an easy way for the person across you to understand. It's very logical. I like logical people because I studied math.
Yeah. There's a poem called Lessons by Margaret Atwood. The last line of that poem says, "A word after word after word is power." And I wish more people read that poem because you realize that so much of how you interact with the world is just linguistics. If you can speak and articulate, a lot happens. And yeah, that's I'm always grateful to my mom for that superpower.